What's happening, everybody? This episode, we're going to talk about the best hard drives for Chia plotting and farming. So, the ultimate goal is to have plots on a hard drive, a lot of them, that we can farm. And because of that, you're going to need a lot of storage. So the farming aspect of this is to get as much capacity as possible. The plotting aspect is to get the fastest drives as possible with the appropriate amount of storage. Those are just temporary drives. The end result will ultimately end up on a hard drive with higher capacity. Now I have some various parts and stuff I'm going to show you in this video. I took on the burden of purchasing these myself, so you didn't have to if it's not what you need. But if you do end up buying anything, I have affiliate links below. It'd be really helpful if you use those links. So if I'm talking about anything in this video and you're wondering that exact part, or you just want to support this channel, you can use those links. I also have an Amazon influencer page, because apparently I qualify as an influencer. You can go here and you can find my Chia all-in-one build. And this is just going to have the parts that I used to set up an all-in-one build that can support up to 360 terabytes, which is pretty significant for a single case. So you'll notice with these part lists, you'll have a destination drive, such as this one right here. This is an 18 terabyte. This is really where the expensive part of Chia is. This is what's going to cost you the most money. Now, for the destination drive, this is my recommendation. And I don't come from a background of working with servers and like large amounts of storage for my whole life. I come from a software development background. However, from what I've experienced and also just from some of the experts I've talked with, the high capacity hard drives are going to be better in the long run. Because one, it's less maintenance, and two, it's less power used. And ultimately just gives you more capacity per computer, per hard drive slot, whatever it is. So it just ends up being a more scalable solution. Even if it costs a little bit more per terabyte, it's a better idea. Now, that being said, if you find something like, for example, a 16 terabyte and it's significantly cheaper, then you might want to consider it. But for me, I'm going with the higher capacity 18 terabyte or 20 terabyte or whatever else comes out in the future. So I'm going to create a new page to list out all these hard drives and parts that I'm talking about so you can get a really easy to look at list. So that'll also be on my store link, so check that out. Now, if you enjoy Chia and cryptocurrency, then this channel is what you want to subscribe to. This is Coin Breakthrough. We post new videos every day at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So if you want to stay up to date with what's going on in the cryptocurrency industry, then be sure to slap the subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you know when I post new videos, which 10 a.m. You already know that, right? And I've only missed that like twice, so I'm doing pretty good. So now we know the end goal. We need to get a hard drive full of plots and then connect it up to a computer to farm. Now, this is not a computationally expensive process. You just have to be able to connect it to the computer in some way. So there's various ways to do this. If you have a desktop computer, well, then you can probably just open it up, attach it to the motherboard, and attach it to the power supply. The reality is not all of us use desktops though. When I started with Chia, all I had was a MacBook and an iMac. So for this, you might want something to connect the hard drive to the computer. So you have two options here. Well, actually, I'm going to give you three options. The first option is to just get an external hard drive. So here's an example of an external hard drive that you can just plug into your computer and that'll work just fine. There's no special way you need to connect these drives to the computer. Just think of it, if you can access the files on the hard drive, then it's going to work. You don't have to do anything special, just connect it. So if you're on a laptop or an all-in-one computer where you can't access the insides and add drives to it, then this might be a good solution. Now, you can also buy these and open them up to get the hard drives out. And this is a process called shucking. And sometimes this can save you money, but it's probably going to void the warranty. So in general, I would just recommend to buy the drives as is. It'll be less work for you. And if something goes wrong with the hard drive, then you can get a replacement. Now, personally, I've tried both. The first set of drives, I just bought them by themselves. And then the second set, I got them in enclosures and did a video on removing them from the enclosures. Now, if you have a hard drive and you need to connect it to a computer, but you don't have the external hard drive enclosure, well, you can get one of these. And this is just going to plug into your computer via USB, plug into some outlet, and then you just slide the hard drive in. So it's basically going to work like an external hard drive thing, but it'll allow you to easily remove that hard drive and take it to a different destination. You know, if you have a dedicated farmer and you're just using some computers for plotting to these hard drives, well, in that situation, something like this might be useful. There are also multi-drive, oh heavens. There are also multi-drive variations. Here's an example of a product from Sabrent, and this will allow the storage of 4 drives in these little drive bays. And each one just shows up as its own drive on the computer. So with 18 terabytes, you can get like 72 terabytes of storage. So that's a pretty good option. This also comes in a 5-bay variation, and you can find other ones that support 8 bays, for example. So I'll go ahead and add both the 4 and the 5 variations to the shopping list. All the things you're gonna buy. What I do personally is I just have the case that stores a lot of hard drives. So that's how I manage all my hard drives. And you may need kind of 2 setups. One setup for the plotter, which puts plots on hard drives, and then a setup for a dedicated farmer, which may have access to a lot of hard drives, not just 4. Not that 4 is not a lot, but for those of you who want to do 40 or more, you're probably going to want something different than having, 40 USB hard drives. For that, you can find drive shelves on eBay. Just look up JBOD, just a bunch of disks, JBOD, and you can find something there, and that can connect to a computer through one cable. So you can look up how to do that if you're interested. But for most of you watching this, if you're just getting started, you might just want to consider that, once you get started with Chia and you get some plots going and you fill your hard drives and you're not sure what to do with them, then you might want to consider getting larger storage capacity. Now, another option, if you're somewhere in the middle, maybe 4 drives isn't quite enough, but you don't really have 45 of them, then you can consider an NAS or a network attached storage. Something like a Synology. This is the 12-bay example. It's a little on the pricey side, but it's a really good piece of hardware, and a lot of people love these things, especially if you end up not doing Chia in the future. Well, you have a really good network storage system that you can use for a home server or whatever it might be. So these come in all variations. This is the 12-bay. You may also want to consider the 8-bay or the 6-bay. Here we have the 8-bay, so I will add that to the list as well. The Synology could be an ideal solution if you have a plotter that has no capabilities for hard drive space and is pretty limited on USB ports, such as the NUC. A lot of people are talking about using this as a plotter, and Chia Decentral did a guide on this. So this plus the Synology could be a good solution. All right, so now moving on to solid state drives. This is what allows you to plot quickly and a certain number in parallel based on the storage capacity of the drives. So the example I'm going to start with is an Inland Premium 2 terabyte. And this is going, don't drop it, guys. That's bad. Now, this is not an enterprise drive. However, it's fairly affordable, pretty available, and has a decent life expectancy for total writes. So overall, it's not a bad solution. You just might get faster writing with an enterprise drive, such as these puppies. They're drives, not puppies, just in case you guys were confused. So this is the P4610, and it's a 1.6 terabyte. So at the time of this recording, a plot takes 256 gigabytes of storage, and that's all temporary space, so you can do that as many times as you want. With this, you should be able to do 7 in parallel now. This is a U.2 drive, so you're going to need to convert it somehow to connect to a typical motherboard. So one way of doing that is with an add-in card like this thing, and this just slides right in, and then you put this inside of a PCI slot, and then that's it. It just works. One of the benefits of that is it's designed for constant read and writes, and it has a much longer life expectancy. So if you plan on doing, a petabyte or just a ton of storage, then you might want to consider an enterprise drive. But overall, the SSDs are pretty cheap compared to the destination drives. That's where all your money's going to be eaten up. So, don't overthink it. Just get started. When I first started, I was like, I don't know what parts to get. And anytime I'd come up with an idea, someone would be like, no, you need to do this instead. But eventually I just decided on something and it's working. Okay, now back to the original solution. What if you have a computer that you can't just add in stuff like a drive or this thing, an add-in card. Well, if you have a laptop, sometimes I think they'll have an extra drive slot, but I'm not positive on that. What is wrong with me? Yeah, so that's an option. If you have a laptop that supports two, you could just open it up and add in a drive. If that's not an option for you, then you can use an external drive enclosure. Here's an example of one I've used, and I've talked about this in a negative way on my channel, but overall I think it's a decent solution. The problem I had with it is that I was consuming all of my computational resources on my main computer that I use for all my video stuff, so it wasn't really ideal. Ideally, you can find a laptop or a computer that you're not using 8 to 16 hours a day, and then you can set up plotting just to utilize the computers that aren't doing anything. But you can make this work with your main computer, and I've done it some. So this is just a thing where you just unscrew it, and you're just going to put in a standard M.2 drive into it, and then plug it into your computer. This one's actually Thunderbolt, but they come in USB-C, which I would recommend USB-C or Thunderbolt if your computer supports it. This one was actually pretty expensive, but it had the top reviews and the highest speed. I wanted to get a Thunderbolt one, and it's metal, super nice. A much less nice option would be this one from Sabrent or something similar. So if that previous one was the Gucci of solid state drive enclosures, this is like the Goodwill version. But overall, it's pretty nice. And I think it can get the job done. And it's a lot easier to open, so props to them. So you just put the drive in there like that, click it in, and there's a little like rubbery screw, which is kind of interesting. Not really even a screw, it's just kind of like a plug. Oh, of course. And it's by no means any easier to connect it than the stupid screws from the normal M.2 slots. But yeah, you get the idea. It works. But in general, at least in my experience, the USB stuff is just not as reliable. They disconnect. They decide, hey, I'm not going to work today. They're stupid. They're messy. So it can get the job done, but if you're planning on jumping into this, really consider your budget, and it might be smart to figure out a different way of setting up your system. If you only have a little bit of money and you have a computer that doesn't have storage spots for hard drives and solid state drives, then going external can work, and a lot of people do it. It's just not the most ideal for scalability. But if you just want to do a little bit on the side, then it'll do just fine. Now back to the enterprise drives, another way to connect these is with an M.2 to U.2 converter, which will just go into the motherboard as if it's an M.2 drive. And then you'll just need to connect that to the power supply as well. So I have some cables here I'll show you real quick. And I've talked about these in more detail in my Chia build video, but it's good to just cover them again just in case you're watching. These fancy looking cables that split into numerous cables, well, this can plug into an HBA card, which will go into a PCI slot on your motherboard. And then these can go to numerous drives. So this is how you can connect numerous drives beyond what your motherboard would typically support to a normal motherboard. You just have to also have support for the power for each one of those drives, and very good airflow as these HBA cards get very hot. So you can also get little tiny fans that you can just put right on the heatsink of the HBA card, similar to how you put a fan on your processor, and that can help it keep cool. Now the last example I have is an external solid state drive that I actually purchased last year or so for some media files. And my original idea was to start using this for plotting, but it didn't work as good as I expected. And there's just a few suggestions I would have to say, and that is, if you haven't bought anything yet, then instead of buying a dedicated external SSD, one that you can't really open and it's just a thing you buy, instead of doing that, you might want to just get the drive by itself and an enclosure, because it's more versatile. For example, you can take the drive out and put a new one in if this one gets fried, and you can know specifically what drive is inside of there, so you can check the TBW to make sure it's going to last long enough. The connectivity with this one is super flaky. It always disconnects just for fun, and there's not really much I can do with it. I mean, I could try to get the drive out of there, but it's like literally impossible, and there's no videos on YouTube. It's like glued shut. So it's just not what I would recommend. But But ultimately, go into this looking at what you already have and how you can utilize it. Because, if you already have a solid state drive laying around that's just an external SSD, then you might just be good to start plotting and you're good to go. But if you don't really have any parts, then just be smart going into it. Now, there's one thing I also want to recommend, and that is don't use your operating system drives for plotting if that operating system and the files on there are very important. So for example, on my iMac, I'm not going to plot from the solid state drive in the iMac, because if that solid state drive failed from too many writes, I could potentially lose all of my important documents. If you have a dedicated plotter, it might be a little bit different. For example, you could install the operating system on this, and then if it failed, you could just reinstall the operating system, just making sure you have your seed phrase backed up. Because installing the operating system doesn't take that long, and it's probably not going to happen. I just wouldn't want to risk it with some very important files on that computer. So that is one way you can save money. Personally, I just get a really low capacity drive for the operating system. So I use this Kingston. It's just a 120 gigabyte SATA SSD, and it works perfectly fine. And the only thing I use it for is to install Ubuntu and install Chia and start plotting and farming. If all this was too much and you just need a more step-by-step example, well, you can check out my Chia build video, watch through that, and then follow it up with my Chia plotting and farming guide, which came out like 2 days later. Then you can come back, watch this video, get a little bit more extra information. And then finally, there's going to be a little bit of some changes to that Chia build. Overall, it's going to be pretty much the same, but Chia has recently updated, which allows more plots in parallel for the same storage and the same RAM. So I could change the parts for this computer and make it a little bit more cost effective. But if you build it just as is, it's fine. Most important thing is just get something going and get started. Well, that is enough rambling from me in one day. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's considering getting into Chia. Or you know what, if you're a hard drive manufacturer by some chance, and you're watching this, and you want to sponsor me, bruh, let's do it. With that, that's all I got, so stay tuned for the next video, and I'll see you then. Peace out.